My family skipped every milestone to care for my sick brother. At my wedding, I cut them off. Weeks later, a text thread revealed the truth. He was faking it and they helped him do it. You ever look back on your life and realize the people you thought were protecting you were actually the ones holding you back the whole time? That's what hit me the night before my wedding when I stood in front of the mirror, tux fitted, vows in my pocket, and realized my parents and my little brother wouldn't be there, not because they couldn't come, but because I didn't invite them. And I finally knew why. Growing up, I thought I had a decent shot at the American dream, a warm home, parents who loved us, backyard cookouts, family vacations to places like Wisconsin Dells or Lake Geneva, nothing extravagant, but enough to make it feel like we were all on the same team. That illusion cracked when I was about 10 and my younger brother Neil had an asthma episode during one of his soccer games. From that point forward, our house didn't feel like home anymore, it felt like a hospital wing. At first, we all worried. You see your kid brother gasping for breath on the field and yeah, your heart stops. But then the doctors said it was a mild case. Manageable. Inhaler, some meds, just watch for triggers. My parents didn't hear that part though. All they heard was Neil is fragile and it became their gospel. I was 12 when it started really affecting me. I had this band recital at school. I wasn't some prodigy or anything, but I practiced every night, really put in the work. I even caught Dad humming one of the tunes once, which made me think they'd actually show up like they promised. But about an hour before the concert, I got a call from Mom. Neil was having a flare-up and they had to stay home. Later that night, I found out from Grandma that Neil was fine. He was at home playing video games, laughing like nothing was wrong. That was the first time I felt the gut punch of invisibility. My parents didn't even bother to lie well. My 16th birthday was next. Grandma and Grandpa came in from Florida, God bless them. They wanted to throw a small surprise bash. Nothing big, just cake, balloons, some family. I was stoked. But guess who needed to go to urgent care that afternoon? Yep, Neil. Mom and Dad took the only car, the one with the cake and decorations in the trunk, and disappeared until late that night. I sat around in a half-decorated living room with my grandparents, eating grocery store cupcakes and pretending I didn't care. Later found out Neil had a runny nose. Seasonal allergies. Not life-threatening, barely even inconvenient. I can't count the number of times things like that happened. High school graduation? Missed it. I was valedictorian, gave the speech and everything, but my parents were too worried because Neil was stressed about his finals the next week. Next week? They couldn't even pretend it was urgent. College? I put myself through it. Chemical engineering, full scholarship for the first 2 years, then part-time jobs, late-night janitor shifts, tutoring, anything to keep myself afloat. Meanwhile, Neil had a full ride paid for by the medical emergency fund my parents had been saving all along. For what? A dude who barely used his inhaler. And you know what stung the most? It wasn't the missed birthdays or skipped graduations. It was the fact that even when Neil was perfectly fine, and he often was, they still treated him like the world would end if he didn't get every last ounce of attention. By the time I met Jamie, I was numb to it all. He came from this warm, loud, loving family that celebrated every little win like it was the Super Bowl. First time his mom hugged me, I nearly flinched. That's how foreign real affection felt. So when he proposed 3 years into our relationship, I knew exactly what I didn't want at our wedding. I didn't want Mom darting out in the middle of the ceremony because Neil forgot his meds. I didn't want to hear Dad whispering in the back row about Neil's headaches. I didn't want to look into the crowd and see them pretending to care when they never had. That's when I made the call. No invitation for them. No warning. Just silence. But the real twist didn't come until after the wedding. That's when the lies they built their whole world on finally cracked open, and it turned out Neil wasn't the sick one after all. A few days after the wedding, things got loud, texts, voicemails, missed calls, like everyone in the family suddenly remembered I existed, not because they missed me, but because I had the audacity to not include the Holy Trinity, Mom, Dad, and Neil. At first, I ignored them. Jamie said it best, it's your day, not their drama, but even silence can feel heavy when it's filled with accusations. One voicemail from my mom hit differently though. She said, "You've always resented your brother for things he couldn't control." That line sat with me like spoiled milk in my stomach. Was that what they really believed? That all those missed moments, all those skipped celebrations were justified because Neil was just too sick? That maybe I was the villain in their story? I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I should have given them a chance. Maybe I should have let them at least attend, even if I had to seat them in the back. But then Jamie's mom called me sweetest woman, pediatric nurse with 3 decades at a top children's hospital. She had tried to extend an olive branch to my parents after the wedding. Just a conversation, a maybe we can find some common ground kind of call. She told me later my mom hung up the moment she suggested Neil's medical condition might not match his active lifestyle, you know, the one where he plays in 2 different sports leagues, hikes every weekend, and just ran a 10K. Apparently, questioning the narrative was the ultimate offense. That's when the memories started coming back sharper. Like when I was 17 and saved up for months to buy a dress for homecoming. I was on court that year, big deal at my school. Night of the dance, I was curling my hair, putting on that dress that cost me more than I'd spent on clothes all year, when suddenly Neil had severe abdominal pain. My parents rushed him to the ER, told me to stay ready in case they made it back in time. They didn't. I stood in front of the mirror for 3 hours, fully dressed, heart sinking, while my date eventually texted he'd gone without me. I never wore the dress again. Diagnosis? Gas. Not appendicitis. Not anything urgent. Just gas. So no, I wasn't being petty. I wasn't resentful of things he couldn't control. I was exhausted from years of being treated like my milestones were optional and his minor inconveniences were emergencies. That's not resentment. That's reality. Then came the real punch in the gut. My cousin Kay, who had always been one of the few family members that didn't treat me like I was being overly dramatic, asked if we could grab coffee. We hadn't talked much since the wedding, but she said she had something important to share, something I needed to know. We met at this quiet little spot near her office, and she didn't even wait for the coffee to cool before dropping it. Neil told me he used to fake his symptoms. I thought I misheard her at first. She went on, said that back in high school Neil had admitted it to her during a family barbecue. He was tipsy, feeling cocky, and apparently told her it became a game, how much he could get away with, how far he could push it before anyone caught on. He said it started small. Pretend his chest hurt so he could skip math class. Fake dizziness to get out of helping with chores. But over time he realized something darker. Being sick made him the center of attention. It made Mom drop everything. Made Dad get emotional. And more importantly, it made me disappear. I just stared at her. For a second I thought maybe this was a prank or some sick joke, but she was dead serious. I should have told you sooner, she said, but I didn't want to stir the pot. Then she pulled out her phone and showed me the texts. They weren't from Neil, they were from my mom, sent just days before the wedding. Messages about how Neil might not be able to handle seeing you get all that attention and how maybe if he got sick again, people would remember what really matters. She was planning it. A disruption. A crisis. Before even knowing they weren't invited. That's when the numbness turned into something hotter. Rage? Maybe. But also a kind of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. They really were willing to derail my wedding day to keep the spotlight off me. When Kay showed those texts to a few other family members, the tide started to shift. The uncle who used to call me a drama queen apologized. The cousin who skipped the wedding sent me a long message about how sorry he was for not understanding. Even Grandma said, I always wondered why your accomplishments never seemed to matter to your parents. Jamie just held me that night, didn't say much. He didn't need to. For the first time in my life, someone chose me not for convenience or crisis control, but for who I really was. And that's when I knew the story wasn't over. Because if Neil had been faking all along, how deep did this go? After that night with Kay, after hearing her say the words I'd been secretly whispering to myself for years, it was like a switch flipped in my head. Every memory, every canceled event, every excuse, they all flooded back, but now with a new lens. I started seeing the patterns not as bad luck or coincidence, but as something a lot more deliberate. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I didn't sleep much that week. My mind kept circling back to one thing. If Neil really did all this for attention and if Mom went along with it, or worse, orchestrated it herself, then what exactly had my entire childhood been? I told Jamie everything Kay said, even showed him the screenshots. He wasn't surprised. I've seen the way your mom talks about Neil, he said. She treats him like a glass figurine and you like you're supposed to carry the whole damn shelf. We both agreed that if there were any doubts left about not inviting them to the wedding, those doubts were dead and buried. But I still wanted answers. Not apologies, those were too late. Just the truth. Or at least a chance to confront it head-on. So I reached out to Neil. I sent a simple message, heard some things. I think we need to talk. No accusations. No threats. Just an invitation. He didn't respond. Not that day, not the next, not even when Kay confirmed she'd told him I knew about everything. She said he got angry, told her she was betraying the family, accused her of taking my side. That was rich, considering he'd spent years making sure I never had a side at all. It was a quiet kind of fury I felt. Not explosive. Not loud. Just a cold, steady realization that maybe I'd never get the closure I thought I needed. And yet, the hits just kept coming. A few days later, Jamie's mom, bless that woman, called again. She had tried one last time to reach out to my mom, hoping maybe now, after everything, there was a sliver of understanding to work with. What she got instead was a tirade. Apparently, my mom told her that Neil's anxiety had worsened significantly after being excluded and that he had to be rushed to the ER the day of the wedding. Said he could barely breathe and was inconsolable. But here's the kicker, Kay had seen him that same day at a baseball game, beer in hand, joking with his buddies in the front row. He wasn't in the ER. He was watching the Cubs lose and laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. That lie, that lazy, recycled script of Neil isn't well, that's when I knew for certain they hadn't just ignored my life. They actively erased it. Every celebration, every moment of pride was always weighed against Neil's mood, Neil's condition, Neil's convenience. So I started digging deeper into the past, piecing together all the strange little moments that never made sense before. Like when I was offered a spot in a summer research program, huge opportunity, fully funded, prestigious university. I was 16. I remember sitting at the dinner table buzzing with excitement, laying out all the details, and Mom just looked at me and said, "That's nice, but how will we manage Neil's routine if you're gone for the summer?" A week later, Neil had a flare-up and they told me it wasn't a good time for me to be away from home. I turned the offer down. And I believed I was doing the right thing. Or when I got nominated for a state science fair and my parents said they couldn't afford the hotel for the weekend. But that same month, they bought Neil a new gaming laptop because he needed a distraction while recovering. He just had a sore throat. And then there was that time at the family reunion when I tried to share that I'd gotten a research grant. Before I could finish the sentence, Mom cut in to announce that Neil had just picked up a part-time job at the grocery store. Everyone clapped. Nobody asked about the grant. I'd been ghosted in my own family for so long, I didn't even realize I'd stopped talking about my wins altogether. But the moment that finally snapped it all into focus came a few weeks later when I got another message, this time from Neil. Subject line, "I need to say something." It was a long email, rambling in parts. But buried in all the nervous backpedaling and awkward apologies, there was something real, he confessed. To everything. He admitted he exaggerated his symptoms growing up. That he saw early on how Mom and Dad lit up whenever he was unwell. He said that pretending to be sick felt like the only way to matter in their eyes. It started as little things, skipping chores, dodging homework, but became bigger every time he saw how they dropped everything for him and forgot everything else, especially me. What hit hardest wasn't the admission, it was the fact that he wasn't just sorry. He was angry too. At himself, at our parents, at the whole twisted game. He said he never meant to hurt me, but he also didn't know how to stop. It became who he was. The sick one. The fragile one. Even when he was fine. He said when Kay showed him our mom's texts about creating a distraction during the wedding, he felt physically sick. That seeing our mother plan yet another sabotage, this time on what should have been the most important day of my life, finally made him realize just how deep this dysfunction ran. But then came the part one didn't expect. He said he wanted to change. That he was in therapy. That he was trying to unlearn the patterns. That he didn't want to be the reason I kept feeling small. And then he asked, "Can we talk?" Not as the golden child and the forgotten one. Just as siblings. Starting over. I didn't know how to answer. Still don't really. Because even with all this truth out in the open, one question remained. If we both grew up in the same house, how did we end up living such different stories? I stared at Neil's email for what felt like hours, reading and rereading every word like I was searching for a hidden message beneath the apology. I didn't respond right away. Part of me didn't trust it, not because I thought he was lying, but because I knew how easy it was to feel sorry after the damage was already done. And some damage doesn't just get swept away with a heartfelt email. Still, I couldn't ignore it. Not after everything. I talked it over with Jamie that night. He listened without interrupting, just letting me get the thoughts out one by one, like I needed to hear them in the air before they made sense in my head. He says he wants to change, I told him, pacing the living room with that tight ache in my chest I'd carried since childhood. But I don't even know who I am around him anymore. I haven't in years. Jamie nodded. So maybe now's the time to find out. I knew he was right. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut forever. But a bigger part, one I hadn't acknowledged in years, wanted to see if there was still something worth salvaging. Not for the past. That was already written. But maybe for whatever came next. So I agreed to meet Neil. We picked a quiet coffee shop halfway between our apartments, neutral ground. It was raining that morning, like some old cliché, but the kind that makes everything quieter. I showed up first, nerves chewing through my stomach. When he walked in, I didn't recognize him at first. He looked lighter. Not physically, but emotionally. Like someone who'd finally put down a weight he'd been carrying too long without realizing how much it was crushing him. He smiled nervously and sat down. For a few minutes, we just talked like strangers. Weather, traffic, the awkward tension of two people trying to figure out how to begin something they never had in the first place. Then finally he said, "I meant everything I wrote. And I know it doesn't fix things. But I needed to say it anyway." I let him talk. He explained how therapy started as a joke, something his girlfriend pushed him into after one too many breakdowns, but it became a mirror he couldn't look away from. He saw how he learned to weaponize weakness, how our parents rewarded him not for being strong, but for being broken. And how I became the scapegoat for every time he needed to be the center of attention. "I didn't know how to be anything else," he said, his voice cracking in a way that didn't sound rehearsed or pitiful. "And the truth is, I was jealous of you. You worked hard. You built a life. I faked illness and all I got was a free ride that led nowhere." That line stuck. Because while I'd spent years trying to prove I mattered, Neil was realizing he never really earned the pedestal they put him on. But what he said next, that was the moment the floor tilted beneath me. "I found out something else," he said, pulling his phone from his jacket and opening a folder of screenshots. "When I started calling them out, they threatened to cut me off." I blinked. "Who?" "Mom and Dad," he said quietly. "They said if I kept defending you, if I kept digging, they'd pull everything. The apartment, the car, the credit cards. Everything." It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Even after everything, I didn't expect them to weaponize loyalty the same way they'd weaponized love. But Neil wasn't done. "They told me you were just jealous. That you always exaggerated. That you'd twist things like you always have." He looked me straight in the eyes then. "But you didn't twist anything." "They did." We sat there in silence for a long time after that. Two siblings finally face to face without the lies between us. There was no hugging, no dramatic moment of reconciliation. But there was something more real than that. A kind of fragile honesty neither of us had ever been allowed to express under our parents' roof. "I don't know if we'll ever be close," I told him. "But this is a start." He nodded. Later that week, he told me he was planning to move out of the apartment our parents paid for. Said he was looking for a real job, not just the part-time gig at his friend's startup. Said he needed to know who he was without Mom and Dad pulling the strings. But just when I thought things might finally be shifting, the other shoe dropped. Our parents found out about our meeting. And they did not take it well. It started with a voicemail from my father, angry, sharp, full of venom. "I can't believe you'd turn your brother against us," he growled. "You're tearing this family apart." Then came a message from my mom, crying this time, claiming I was breaking Neil's spirit and that he'd been hospitalized from the stress. But Kay sent me a photo from that same day. Neil at the gym, lifting weights and smiling like nothing had happened. They weren't even trying to lie convincingly anymore. They just wanted control. That night, I sat down and wrote a letter I'd waited 20 years to write. Not to Neil, not to Jamie, not even to myself. To them, my parents. Not to burn a bridge, but to finally stop walking toward one that never led anywhere. There's a difference between writing something to be read and writing something just to get it out of your soul. That night, I sat at my desk with the rain tapping against the window like a metronome and poured 20 years of silence into a single document. Not a rant, not a plea, just the truth. My truth. The one they spent years drowning out in favor of Neil's coughs and sniffles. I didn't even bother starting with "Dear Mom and Dad." The words didn't belong to them. They belonged to me. "You told me family sticks together. But you only ever stuck to one of us. You told me to be understanding. But you never tried to understand me. You said Neil needed you. I did too. You just didn't notice." I laid it all out. The birthdays they forgot. The awards they skipped. The nights I sat alone wondering what I'd done wrong to be invisible. I reminded them how they missed my valedictorian speech because Neil was panicking about finals a week away. How they told me the science program I earned wasn't practical because who would be there for Neil? I told them how I used to think something was wrong with me, that maybe if I got one more certificate, one more achievement, they'd finally look at me like I mattered. But every time I did, Neil got sick, and the spotlight swung back to him. I learned not to get excited, not to expect anything, not to dream too loudly. Then I told them about the wedding, how I had imagined, for a brief second, what it would have felt like to have them watch me say my vows, to have my mother zip up my dress, to have my father raise a glass to his daughter's future. But I'd already lived that disappointment too many times. I knew better. I ended the letter with one final truth. I didn't exclude you from the wedding to punish you. I did it to protect myself. From your patterns. From your chaos. From your silence every time I needed your voice. I'm not a villain. I'm just done waiting to be seen. I didn't send it. I printed it, folded it neatly, and locked it in the drawer where I keep things that remind me who I am. The letter from my thesis advisor, Jamie's first birthday card to me, a photo of me and my grandparents at my graduation. The letter wasn't for them. It was for the version of me that still lingered in the shadows of that old house, still wondering if she was worth loving. After that, I blocked their numbers. For real this time, not just silencing them, cutting the thread. I muted the group chats, filtered the emails, even talked to Jamie's lawyer friend about what to do if things escalated. I wasn't scared. I was just done playing defense. But the universe? It wasn't done yet. A week later, Neil texted again. They found out about the email, about us meeting. Mom flipped. They threatened to pull the plug on everything. Rent, car, even insurance. I told them to go ahead. I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified for him. He said he'd already lined up a new job in a different city and was crashing on a buddy's couch until his first paycheck cleared. He was breaking free. Not for me, for himself. That meant more than any apology ever could. Do you think they'll ever get it? He asked when we spoke on the phone later that night. I paused. No. And honestly, I don't think they want to. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. Neil told me something else then. Something that made everything click in a way I wasn't expecting. When we were kids, he said, I once heard Mom say to Dad, at least when Neil's sick, I know how to help. With her, I never know what to say. That hit me harder than anything else. Because that was it, wasn't it? I wasn't difficult, I was just unknown. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't need fixing. I just needed to be seen. But they didn't know how to love a child who didn't scream for it. So they poured it all into the one who did. The next day, Jamie and I signed the lease for our new apartment in Boston. He got the job he'd been holding out for at a major research institution. I landed a position with a biotech firm that was doing the kind of work I used to dream about in those quiet midnight shifts at college. We started packing together, box by box, piece by piece. And for the first time, the act of leaving didn't feel like running away. It felt like building something from scratch with no shadows hanging over us. I didn't invite Neil to help, but I sent him the address. He sent back a thumbs up and a single sentence, this time I'll show up. And somehow that was enough. Moving out of the city where I'd spent so much of my life felt surreal. I kept waiting for the guilt to creep in, those old voices whispering, you're abandoning your family, you're turning your back on everything you were raised to endure. But it never came. Not this time. Not with Jamie beside me and our new apartment waiting, walls untouched by old memories or unexplained tears. Boston felt like a clean slate. Cold, brisk, honest. The kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions about where you came from, they just wanted to know where you were going. The first night in our new place, we sat on the floor eating takeout straight out of the cartons. No furniture, just two people and a sense of peace that I'd never really known before. Jamie raised his beer and said to finally being done with ghosts. I raised mine too, to not needing permission to be happy. He grinned. Took you long enough? We laughed. But he was right. I didn't realize just how heavy that permission had always weighed on me until it wasn't needed anymore. For so long, everything I achieved came with that question hanging in the air. Would they notice this time? Would they care? And now, for the first time, I didn't want them to. A few days after the move, I got another message from Neil. Just a photo this time. He was standing in front of a small, weathered apartment building, holding up a key. The caption read, "No more handouts." I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't care, but because it meant more than either of us could put into words. That key wasn't just for his front door. It was for a future he was finally choosing on his own. Later that week, I agreed to meet up with him again, this time for lunch at a little pub not far from my office. He looked different. Not dramatically, but enough. Like someone who was still working things out, but doing it honestly this time. We talked about work, life, the little things. And then, out of nowhere, he said, "I've been thinking about writing Mom and Dad a letter." I stared at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "Not to fix anything. Just to tell them I see the damage now. That I'm not going to play my part in it anymore." I nodded slowly. "If you do, just be ready for silence. Or worse, gaslighting." "I know," he said. "But I think I need to say it for me. Not for them." It was strange, hearing him say things I'd once whispered into the void of a closed bedroom door, praying someone would hear. Now here he was, sitting across from me, echoing truths that had once made me feel insane. He asked if he could read me a draft when he finished it. I told him yes. That weekend, Jamie's family visited. His parents brought housewarming gifts, his sisters brought wine, and by the end of the night, we were sitting around our kitchen table playing a ridiculous trivia game and laughing so hard it hurt. At one point, his mom reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "We're proud of you, you know? Not just for what you've done, but for who you've become." I almost cried. Not because I needed their approval, but because it came so freely. So effortlessly. So unlike anything I'd ever known. Later that night, I lay awake thinking about everything. The wedding. The texts. The voicemail from my father accusing me of tearing the family apart. The silence that followed when I didn't respond. I realized something important. All this time, I'd been waiting for some grand closure. A final confrontation. A perfect moment where they'd suddenly see the truth, fall to their knees, and beg for forgiveness. But real life doesn't work like that. Sometimes closure isn't a door swinging shut, it's you deciding not to knock anymore. A few days later, Neil sent me his letter. It was short, honest, full of accountability. No blame shifting. No self-pity. Just a man finally speaking from the part of himself that had always been hidden behind wheezing lungs and excuses. At the end he wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm stepping out of the role you built for me. I'm done being your excuse. And I won't be part of your silence anymore." I told him it was brave. He said it was necessary. He mailed it a week later. And when no reply came, I think we both finally understood. The people we'd spent so long trying to earn love from weren't capable of giving it in the way we needed. And that's when something even better happened. We stopped needing it. Boston settled around us like a warm coat, something that fit a little stiff at first, but eventually felt like it had always belonged on our shoulders. Jamie and I fell into a rhythm that felt easy, unforced. He dove into his new lab work, and I got my feet under me at the biotech firm, slowly building relationships that weren't laced with guilt or competition. No one here knew my history. No one flinched when I talked about my childhood with vague words and polite deflection. That was the beauty of starting over. You get to choose what comes with you and what stays buried back in the place you left behind. Neil's letter, the one he'd poured his truth into, never got a reply, not even an acknowledgement. I told him not to expect anything, and he said he didn't. But still, when silence follows a scream for honesty, it stings in a place you thought had long gone numb. He texted me a week later. "Got the silence I expected, but it still hit harder than I thought." I told him, "That silence isn't about you. It's about their fear." We both knew it was true. Our parents weren't avoiding us, they were avoiding accountability. And silence was their favorite armor. But I think Neil needed to feel that one last time. Needed to face it and walk through it without trying to fix it. Something shifted between us after that. The distance that used to feel like a chasm, me on one side, him on the other, began to narrow. Not because we were suddenly best friends or calling each other every weekend, but because for the first time in our lives we were standing on the same ground. We weren't the sick one and the forgotten one anymore. We were just two people trying to heal from the same story, told in different chapters. A few weeks later, Jamie and I hosted a small get-together in our apartment. Just a handful of colleagues, a couple of neighbors, and, to my surprise, Neil. I hadn't pushed him to come, hadn't even officially invited him. But he showed up anyway, carrying a six-pack of craft beer and looking like he wasn't sure if he belonged. "You look surprised," he said. "I am," I replied, laughing. "Me too," he admitted. That night, he didn't talk about therapy. He didn't bring up Mom or Dad. He didn't try to explain himself or replay old scenes. He just existed in the space, joked with Jamie, asked questions about my work. He even offered to help clean up afterward. It was the first time I'd ever seen him just be a person, not a performance. When everyone had left and it was just the three of us stacking plates and laughing about one of Jamie's coworkers mistaking our neighbor's dog for a mop, Neil pulled me aside. I'm not looking to rewrite the past, he said. I just want to be better in your future. I didn't say anything at first. Just nodded. That was enough. That same night, I got a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was hoarse, soft, like she'd been crying for hours. She didn't say sorry. She didn't mention the letter. All she said was, I hope one day you understand that I was doing my best. And that was it. No reflection. No responsibility. Just the same line I'd heard my whole life, her best, which never quite included me. I didn't reply, because I do understand now. Her best wasn't good enough. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for thinking that. I didn't feel broken or bitter or hollowed out by the weight of it. I just felt free. In the following weeks, Jamie and I started making our own traditions. Sunday pancakes in pajamas. Monthly bookstore dates. Hikes through the changing New England trees. Quiet, simple things that felt like home. One night, while watching the city lights flicker from our balcony, Jamie asked, Do you miss them? I thought about it. I miss what I thought they were, I said, but not who they really are. It wasn't an easy answer, but it was an honest one, because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live with the scars without letting them bleed into every new moment. It's about laughing without checking who's watching, loving without needing approval, and showing up for yourself the way no one else ever did. It's strange how quiet life can get when the chaos dies down. After all the noise, years of shouting without words, tears swallowed back, milestones trampled by excuses, you half expect something else to rise in the silence. But what came wasn't emptiness. It was peace. I started noticing little things. Things I used to overlook because my mind was always somewhere else. The way Jamie absent-mindedly hums while brushing his teeth. The sound of rain against the apartment windows during early mornings. The way my heart doesn't clench anymore when I see a family out celebrating. Because I finally understood something vital. You don't need the people who broke you to be the ones who help you heal. My parents didn't reach out again. After that last voicemail, they slipped back into the silence they always retreated to when the truth got too loud. And I let them. Not because I stopped caring, but because I stopped begging. I no longer had the energy to translate myself into a language they never tried to understand. They had their chance. And I spent far too long letting their version of love define my worth. Neil kept moving forward. We weren't suddenly best friends or bound by some cheesy sibling redemption arc. But we were honest now. Occasionally, we'd grab coffee or meet for lunch, and there'd be this unspoken agreement. The past existed, but it didn't get to run the show anymore. One afternoon, he told me he'd cut off financial ties with our parents completely. Moved into a cheaper apartment. Started budgeting. Even called it his freedom fund. I could see in his eyes that he was scared, but also that he was finally learning who he was outside of being sick, pitted, or praised. You know, he said one day, I used to think you were just cold, like distant. Now I realize you were just surviving. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I told him, and you were performing. He nodded. Yeah, I think we both just got really good at not being seen. Sometimes that's all it takes. A moment of shared recognition. No apologies. No rehashing. Just acknowledgement. Jamie's family kept showing up like clockwork. On my birthday, his mom sent me a handwritten card. Not just a signature, but a full letter about how proud she was of the life I was building. His dad mailed me a book on leadership with sticky notes marking passages he thought I'd like. It made me cry, because this was what love looked like when it didn't come with conditions. When it didn't disappear the second someone else needed the spotlight. It didn't ask for proof or demand sacrifice. It just stayed. In time, I stopped checking their social media accounts. Moms, dads, even distant cousins. I didn't want to know who they were telling their version of the story to. I didn't care what roles they cast me in. I wasn't living in that play anymore. One evening, Jamie and I sat on the balcony, watching the skyline turn amber with the setting sun. He asked me if I felt like I got closure. I thought about it. No, I said. I got something better. I got a life. He smiled, pulled me close, and kissed the top of my head. You deserved one all along. And that was it. No dramatic final confrontation. No perfect apology. Just a girl who grew into a woman, learned to stop chasing the wrong kind of love, and finally gave herself permission to be the main character of her own story. That's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't just scar you. Teaches you. Shows you what to protect, who to let in, and when to walk away. And if you're lucky, it leads you home. Not to the place you came from, but to the place you built yourself. From the ground up, brick by brick. Truth by painful, freeing truth. And that's where I live now. Not in their shadow, but in my own light.